Looking for someone, I guess I'm doing that.
Well, I think with Trespass is that we kind of feel is really the first kind of proper Genesis album. The Genesis Revelation stuff was songs we'd kind of written with the original intention of other people doing them, and no one else would do them, and then we sort of modified them a bit so they fit this kind of broad concept we had, and then just recorded them while we almost just left school. Very simple. We never played live or anything, and we just I played mainly piano on it and stuff. By the time we did Trespass, we'd been playing on the road for a few months, and we had a whole, obviously about an hour and a half's worth of material, and we just recorded what we thought were the sort of better ones for Trespass.
From the beginning, we set out as songwriters, and we were sort of quite happy to be writing what were effectively pop songs. But I think there was always inside of us a yearning to explore, to push the boundaries, and to mix styles. And as we started to get a little more adventurous, it got too out of mainstream, left field for Jonathan and for the publisher that we were working with then, Joe Roncaroni. And so we sort of parted ways at that point. And at the same time, we were rehearsing and I think building an identity and a sound. And Trespass was really the first opportunity we had to make a real album where we felt we were in the driving seat, if you like. John Anthony was there as a producer, and he was a great sort of man for performance and getting the energy. But I think the style and the arrangements and the approach was all determined by us for the first time.
From Genesis to Revelation was kind of an album kind of embarked on in a very naive way, but with a huge amount of fun. But I think we always felt that we had a lot of say, despite Jonathan King obviously being the sort of head honcho. I don't think we sort of felt that we were not doing what we wanted to do. Conversely, with Trespass, I don't think we sort of felt suddenly kind of emancipated from some sort of odious yoke in a way, as if this is going to be completely different, because we had a producer, John Anthony. The material was very much dictated by what we'd done on the road. I think I'm obviously speaking for myself, but I think I remember the feeling with the others that if we'd had more time, we would have actually gone back to some of the music that we'd jettisoned. Because, recorded music is different to live music, but the tendency then, having been on the road, the pressure of the schedule, was to do the music that you were touring with, particularly if it's complex, because there wasn't enough time to rehearse new stuff. And we jettisoned all this sort of, what you might call sort of more adult, progressive, from Genesis to Revelation acoustic music, because it had just died on the road.
I think in a way the Trespass album was our first album as a band, you know what I mean? Genesis to Revelation was really a bunch of kids in a holiday time, which is fine, and an amazing opportunity, but between that album and Trespass, we'd become a band. We'd done live concerts, we were on the road, we were gigging band, we'd played together, we'd done the Cottage era, and I think really it's a strange album in some ways. The first album we actually ever did, only album we actually did, where we played it live before we recorded it, which I wouldn't do again, funny enough, but it's the first album I think that we felt like a band.
I was 17 in 1967, and that was an amazing year to sort of be entering adulthood. I'd sneak out from school and go down to the Electric Garden in Covent Garden, it's this basement club, and you'd see all these oil projections on the wall, and it was third-year band, or all this psychedelia, really, that was just the Indica galleries. There was so much going on, IT and Oz magazines. There was this cultural explosion happening, and it was this sense that youth, for the very first time, was taking over the world, and hypnotizing, intoxicating, that every barrier was being smashed down. And so, in our small, little isolated cell, we definitely felt connected to that. I think me probably more than everybody else, but this sense of trying to do things in a new way, in a different way, and that was very important.
I think we were sort of influenced, obviously in the early days we were very influenced with the Beatles, Beach Boys, Kinks, all that sort of stuff, which produced, which is still sort of very, very influenced on us throughout our career. But by that time we'd heard groups like Family and the Procol Harum album, Shine On Brightly, and Salty Dog, and Fairport Convention, and the way they were doing things interested us. It just showed slightly different approaches. You weren't trying to write hit songs, trying to sort of make music sort of do a little bit more than that, and this appealed to us. And the idea of having a bit more room to breathe, songs creeping up to sort of 7-8 minutes, just seemed a lot more exciting to us, and the idea of being able to develop.
People often liken us to, we've been that era of sort of Yes, ELP and stuff, and actually they were very different as they are to us. You listen to Stagnation and those sort of songs, it's an acoustic album, We were always about songs and a bit of playing, but the playing sort of came secondary to the songs, I think.
Fairport Convention influence and the acoustic guitars was quite a big thing. Anthony Phillips and Mike, used to play these two guitars together, and they do a lot of interweaving sort of parts and the harmonies they created between them, which was very much a sort of part of early Genesis, and strong part of it actually, and certainly led to the start of what was probably the best song on this album, which is Stagnation, I think. Which is starts off as an acoustic thing, which was a little idea of Mike and Ants, and then it developed by the whole group into a sort of a bigger piece. But it was a very, I think that was quite unique. In fact, no one else really sort of was quite doing that, but it wasn't. It did come from that sort of Fairport sort of roots, I think.
There's a paradox here, you see, because Tony was more from the sort of classical side, but loved pop. Peter was probably heading more towards soul, but the guys that were into the heavy stuff was Mike and I, because we've been in the schoolboy bands, doing Stones, Kinks, and Beatles, and a lot of the heavier bands, and we were the ones that were writing the sort of really sort of third-rate kind of blues riffs and stuff. And we were much less sophisticated to start with. I think what sorted Mike and I out was going to the 12 strings and finding a bit of refinement there. But we were introducing, when we started with this experiment of playing live, we were introducing some very third rate. There was a song called Going Out to Get You, which we used to do, which had a pretty indifferent sort of kind of riffs. I loved all the heavy stuff. I don't think it's true to say that Peter was making us go in that direction. I think that Mike and I wanted to go down it, but it's a good thing we didn't early on, because we weren't very good at it, is the truth of it. When the sort of the songs were developed out of the more refined songs into a heavier element, then I think it had some originality. What Mike and I were bringing to start with was sort of late sort of Stones, kind of Paul Stones riffs and stuff.
The folk sound of it, I think, was definitely from Ant and Mike and this 12-string combination, and I think that was really quite innovative, and I loved it, and I think tried to encourage it from my point of view, because they do these things where they'd get a composite chord. I know this is getting technical here, but one guitar would be playing, one chord and another chord, and you'd read the final chord as a composite of the two. Very boring for most people, but the effect of that was to give us a sound that was, I think, quite unique. And early on, we had one local paper who described us as folk blues mystical. And we were trying always, I think, to sort of, whether it was church music or whatever the influence, whatever the passion, to try and blend it. Nowadays, that seems nothing special. Everyone takes whatever they want. But at that time, music was very segregated. And I remember sitting in some publisher's office, and I think it was a record company, and they were saying, no, you have to decide what you want to be, and then you're a folk group or you're a blues group or whatever. You can't try and cross all these borders and barriers. And, I feel that's what I've been doing my entire musical career, is trying to, whenever someone puts up a barrier, I try and find a way through it.
Let's at each other.
some of the songs there developed out of things that we'd written as in sort of the way we used to write, which Anton might write them together and Peter and I writing together. The Knife particularly was the thing Peter and I sort of put together, and then we kind of developed it in the studio. I'm looking for someone's like that as well. And then obviously things like Dusk and White Mountain on this album came more from the Ant and Mike side. Visions of Angels was a song that was left over from Genesis to Revelation, which we then developed and made a bit more of to make it into a big live song. So, I think we were starting to write as a group, but it's still some vestiges of the individual writing there. I mean, looking back on the album, I like, it's not, I think it was a pretty good, well, I call it first album, it's really a second album, I suppose, pretty good for where it comes in the thing. And I think Stagnation is great. And I'm probably looking for someone. The other songs on the album, don't quite do as much for me anymore as they once did, I mean, I always felt Dusk was a bit of a B track. It sounds okay. And White Mountain used to do that live, and that was quite nice live as well, quite atmospheric. But it was not, I don't think it's as strong as what was to come.
Because we'd played a song so long live, we went in the studio fairly inflexible. We'd found a sound, that's the way it stayed, you know what I mean? And it was in a way a little frustrating. The way we worked after that, we went in with the songs, having never played them live, so actually you could mess around with the sounds. You didn't quite know where you were going sonically. With that album, we defined how the parts went and the songs were. So in a way, that was kind of a unique experience.
It was slightly more sophisticated recording than from Genesis to Revelation, but not a lot. 8-track, I think it was. Can't remember. I know that John Anthony wouldn't let anybody drop in. So I remember Mike had a bit of a classical guitar at the end of Stagnation about 6 minutes in. He had to sit there, listen to the whole track. And of course, by the time it got to this bit, he was so nervous that he fluffed it, and started again. So it wasn't that sophisticated. But there were more tracks. I was able to double track a guitar solo, which would have been on the Knife. Oh, what a giveaway! Which would have been unheard of, from Genesis to Revelation. There weren't the tracks. So yes, it was a bit more sophisticated, and it felt a bit more sort of big boys-ish up to a point.
It was a very rushed sort of thing. You went in there, you had a sort of day or two to do it, and it was quite quick thing. And I mean, I remember being quite nervous, really, doing. You didn't want to make any mistakes because, it wasn't the ability you have now of sort of going back and repairing and overdubbing and stuff. The whole band went in there and we all played it, and you went on and did a take until you got something that was halfway decent from all of you, particularly the drums, because that was the one you really couldn't do anything about. Some of the other stuff you could, but it was. I just remember going in there and just playing the songs. But they were pretty well, we played them on the road, as I say, for a few months, and we were pretty much okay on them, I think, and we just played them pretty much as we'd done them on the road.
It was kind of pleasant because it wasn't too difficult because we knew exactly what we were going to do. It was nice sounds, nice crowd of people. John Anthony was really fun, very humorous, a lot of bad, filthy jokes and stuff all the time, which we were a bit sort of, but he was great, and so it was kind of, I think I just sort of coasted through it, really, to be honest. I went through it on autopilot, is the truth of it, actually. There were no arguments. There'd been so many arguments when we were writing. There was nothing to argue about, really, except the level of whether the organ was higher than the guitar or whatever. So, and John Anthony was in charge of that. So, no, it was pretty pleasant, to be honest. But, no, I mean, I think by that stage of it, I wouldn't say I definitely knew I was going, but I wouldn't say that I was really pretty much on autopilot, actually.
I could barely play bass on the first album. I mean, I wasn't much of a bass player. I'd been playing more guitar with Ant, and then, of course, obviously he's the lead player, so I had to play bass as well as acoustic guitar. I mean, I just think the initial period in Christmas Cottage, where we did that sort of 6 months in the country writing, that's when I felt the band formed as a proper unit. And so it made anything after that feel very different in a good way.